you're watching India Today Global with me, Shita Mitra. It's Thursday morning in the Indian capital, and at this hour, we bring you the latest from around the globe. Starting with one of the biggest elections of the year in the US, the Day 3 of Democratic National Convention was marked by impassioned speeches and performances, with Kamala Harris's VP pick Tim Walz formally accepting his nomination. Former President Bill Clinton, marking his 12th appearance at such conventions, urged audience to scrutinize Trump's record, emphasizing on the importance of looking beyond the rhetoric. The convention also highlighted the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot with a video showing Trump urging his supporters to fight right before they stormed the Capitol. Another speaker, Nancy Pelosi, also asserted that while Trump assaulted democracy, it was the Democrats who rose to defend it. Olivia Troy, a former White House National Security Advisor, also warned of Trump's attempts to undermine the 2024 election. The night also featured few performances by prominent musicians including Stevie Wonder, John Legend, and Sheila E. Coming to West Asia now, where Gaza ceasefire negotiations seem to make no progress. US President Joe Biden has now pressed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the urgency of securing a ceasefire in Gaza and release of hostages. However, the White House says both Israel and Hamas have stuck firmly to their demands. Now, the call between the leaders, in which Vice President Kamala Harris also took place, came after Palestinian health officials reported that at least 50 were killed in Israeli airstrikes in the last 24 hours in Gaza. Now, US, Israeli, Egyptian and Qatari negotiators are expected to meet in Cairo this weekend to discuss and take the negotiations further. Withdrawal of Israeli troops in the Philadelphia corridor, the border strip between Gaza and Egypt, remains a major sticking point between the two sides, while Hamas's demand include an end to Israeli Gaza operation and a full Israeli pullout from the Palestinian strip. And now some news from the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukrainian president revealed that his forces clearly understood what Moscow was attempting to do in eastern Ukraine and that Kyiv was strengthening its forces accordingly. He further urged Kyiv's partners to keep to the agreed timeline for supplying munitions to Ukrainian military. He said that attack the Ukraine launched on Russia's Kursk region on August 6 was still continuing and that his forces controlled some areas but gave no further details. This comes after Ukraine attacked Moscow on Wednesday with at least 11 drones, and now these were shot down by air defenses of the Russian forces, and this was about one of the biggest drone strikes on the capital since the war began. Next up, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, ahead of his historic Ukraine visit, emphasized New Delhi's commitment to peace and diplomacy in a speech in Poland's capital. The Prime Minister highlighted India's traditional stance of maintaining distance from international conflict, but stated that India now aims to build closer ties with all nations. Now, Modi's visit to Ukraine, which is the first by any Indian Prime Minister since Ukraine's independence, is intended to discuss peaceful solutions to the ongoing conflict. And this comes after his trip to Russia, which has drawn criticism from Western allies. Modi also praised Indian diaspora in Poland for their support during the Ukraine crisis and expressed gratitude to Poland for assisting Indian students during the war. Meanwhile, Chinese Premier arrived in Moscow for a 4-day visit, marking the first high-level Chinese official trip to Russia since the recent Ukrainian incursion into Russian territory began. Now, the Chinese leader is set to meet Russian President and Russian Prime Minister to discuss enhancing China-Russia cooperation and strategic ties. And despite Western scrutiny over China's support for Russia amidst the war in Ukraine, Li affirmed the strength and vitality of the bilateral relationship. The visit includes discussion on trade and economic cooperation. Remember, Russia has become increasingly dependent on Chinese trade and investments due to Western sanctions. Some news from Canada now. The country's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called for resolution between country's major rail companies and the Teamster Union to avoid a strike that could negatively impact the economy. Now, if these negotiations fail, Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Kansas City are poised to lock out workers, with potential shutdown threatening billions of dollars in economic damage. The Teamsters say CN and CPKC are seeking concessions that would dilute workers' safety, a charge that both of these companies companies have denied. As of now, talks have stalled, with each side accusing the other of bad faith, and the federal government, including the Labour Minister, is urging both the parties to resolve the dispute at the negotiating table to prevent a shutdown that could cost economy representing about 4% of Canada's GDP. Next up, Pakistan's Federal Investigation Authority or FIA has arrested Farhan Asif for allegedly spreading false information that inflamed recent unrest in the UK. Asif, who ran a website and social media accounts, posted misleading reports about a stabbing incident in Southport, England, claiming that it involved a Muslim asylum seeker. The misinformation contributed to far-right violence and protest in the UK. Now, Asif reportedly admitted to using unverified information from UK-based social media for financial gain. His case has been handed over to the FIA for further investigation. Now, this comes after riots that have been described as the worst disorder in the UK in over a decade. Some more news from Asia. The Bangladeshi government has decided to cancel all diplomatic passports, including those held by former ministers, members of parliament, and their families. This primarily includes those who served during the Awami League government under Sheikh Hasina. Now, the decision follows the recent political upheaval in the country. The Home Ministry has directed the Department of Immigration and Passports to initiate the cancellation process, with orders expected soon. Now, former officials will need to surrender their diplomatic passports and apply for ordinary passports if they wish to travel. This measure currently affects officials who are abroad or have fled the country, with implications for those who are involved in criminal cases or arrests. In another news, senior officials from the US State Department and the White House met with the Dalai Lama in New York. They reaffirmed the US commitment to advancing the human rights of Tibetans, according to state media. This, of course, invited a reaction from China. A spokesperson from the Chinese embassy in Washington said that Beijing is gravely concerned over the meeting and urged the US to have no contact with the Dalai Lama. Now, China considers the 89-year-old exiled spiritual leader as a dangerous separatist. A group of US lawmakers met the Dalai Lama earlier in India and said that they would not allow China to influence the choice of his successor. At last, Australia has announced a significant defence investment by partnering with Norway's Kongsberg Defence to co-manufacture long-range naval and joint strike missiles. Now, the Australian government will contribute Australian dollars of about $850 million to establish the facility at Newcastle Airport present, and this makes it the only production site located outside Norway. The move is part of a broader defence strategy to boost Australia's long-range precision strike capabilities amid rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you so much for watching this segment. Stay tuned to India Today Global for more such updates.